This is Before It Was Headlines, It Was Prophecy, and I'm your host, Katie Elizabeth. I'd like to talk to you today about, as we were watching our politics and the political, playground, but the landscape of American politics, and we watch other world leaders in the political or the of nations, I'd like to just remind us of some things of other powers that are not necessarily, we don't have all eyes on them, but they do have significant power. I'm going to begin with pointing out the fact that through the recent government shutdown, that was when the long-awaited $100 bills were released into circulation. I find that interesting that most of us do realize that the Federal Reserve is a separate entity from the U.S. government. But since Scripture tells us it's the love of money that's the root of all evil, I'm going to use this program to follow a few money trails. And I'm not saying the people at the helm of this are evil at this time, or even that that's where the money trail is going to end, or land through the Great Tribulation. But I'm saying we need to kind of get the mindset that, American politics is very, very new on the scene, a little over 200 years. And while we the people divide over how to be subject to our leaders, we need to also remember the founding fathers that continuously are referred to through these debates and times. We need to stop and consider how they were honoring Romans 13:1 and 2 in 1776 or prior to that time. So let's keep things in perspective that there is nothing new under the sun. And America is relatively young, but it doesn't mean we're doing anything new that hasn't already been tried and failed along the way somewhere. So let's keep that in mind. And as I said, the Federal Reserve released those long-awaited bills that are actually, I've seen one, I've had one in my hand, that actually bear the date of 2009. So, and I just can't help but wonder, we had no way of knowing how many were put into circulation at that time. And, I just continue to look at the congressional puppet theater, and that's what I call it, as a distraction for the bigger power that's being put in place. Because let's face it, this is America, and none of us know of too many politicians that aren't already, that's the whole purpose of the lobby. Politicians can be bought and paid for. So that means there is a greater power behind them that's bankrolling it. And we've all discussed the fact that, without a cajillion dollars, you can't get elected to any, significant position. So money, there is an underlying, the foundation tells us that really most of our, what we consider leaders and representatives are really, they're not. They're put in place by powers behind the scenes. Now, I believe that our president is merely a figurehead, and I believe several in my lifetime have been nothing more than that. This one right now is serving to divide and offer distraction after distraction. Our last administration served to divide the country and bring in some very interesting legislation that this one, although he balked at a lot of it as a senator, has not repealed any of the things that he supposedly argued against in the last administration. And that has happened. This is not just exclusive to Bush 43 and the Obama administration. This happens through history. We are heading towards the fulfillment of prophecy, period. Our choice is where we're going to be standing at the time. That is the free will and choice we are given as human beings. to choose this day whom will serve. Based upon two scriptures, I've come to a different understanding that the trendy end times teaching presented in the 70s, 80s, and even in the 90s, it was eschatology is the term, and I've really changed my views through this time. When Yeshua mentioned the very elect in Matthew 24:24, with the inference that even the very elect could be deceived, and as I've sought that in prayer and come to a different understanding, while Revelation has, everyone continues to acknowledge Revelation mentions the mark of the beast and how the people will worship like one great leader. Worship isn't exactly confined to a couple of hours on Shabbat or Sunday morning. Worship is also our priority, our focus, our adoration, our respect, our dependency. And don't think for a minute they're not people, even leaders, gathering on their given day of the week that truly worship things in their life. And God is just in the mix. And we know that. We've talked about that, whether it was the prosperity teachings or, there's a lot of the teachers doing that now as well. So let's get back to this statement that Yeshua said, except the very elect be deceived. I honestly do not think Islam is going to deceive me. They're pretty bold and out there. And I'm pretty sure I don't want to share in that faith. So I'm thinking deception is not going to play a part with an overt takeover or attack or whatever that some of the people are following. They can threaten me, they can kill me, but, so can American drones. On the other hand, this is where I was following the little money trail here, a big money trail. 13 Americans are in the top 20 of the wealthiest people in the world. In the Forbes list, you can go to the Forbes website. And only one of them is directly involved in American politics, and that's Bloomberg. But one has great power over many of the 10 powers in which even the elect are dependent, the elected and the elect both, and 4 of them share a name that is synonymous with big savings, made in China for Americans, and those who love to hate shopping at their local 24/7 supercenter. So what I'm saying here and the references I'm making, there are people who, have a lot more power over a great many more people than elected officials. We see that. Wal-Mart kept running when the government was closed. The internet kept running when the government was closed. There are a lot of powers and entities that are greater than these individual, than the American government. And we know by watching the American government invade other countries, so if you kind of do that like dominoes, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Where is the real power? The love of money is the root of all evil. Now, knowing, and I'm not saying any of these Americans that are in this list are evil in their heart. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we have a lot of wealth concentrated in this country, but, it's all over the world. But 13 out of 20. So that means 7 out of the top 20 are in other places. In October, our government proved that life went on without Washington. But what happens when buying and selling at the big savings store requires a mark? That is scripture. There'll be no buying and selling without the mark. So what happens that day? And there may be a whole different deal. 40 years ago, nobody had heard of Wal-Mart. So there could be something else that comes into that place before the end of days. But what I'm saying is when everyone, whether they complained about it, gripe about it, love it, it doesn't matter. When the majority is dependent upon getting inside those doors for whatever it is they're after, what happens when somebody is standing at that door and says, "Here we have a policy now. Policy. We're all just following policy." So what happens? Or what happens when the man who owns 500,000 shares of Monsanto, big food supply, vaccinating half of the known world against polio, financed the Common Core curriculum, and literally made the on-off switch of the internet, says, not without the proper bowing down and respect. That's possible. I'm not saying Bill Gates is going to do that, but I'm saying someone down the road, I mean, Bill Gates is older than I am, so, we're not all going to be around here forever. But somewhere down the line, as we see this, as we're watching the political puppetry, there are other entities and other corporations and other individuals who have amassed not only a great deal of wealth, but if you stop and think about it, a great deal of power in how we have become dependent on what they provide. So, I truly believe that, religious presumption this is what I believe, religious presumption has long been proven to be the foundation of deception. The Pharisees' religious presumption is how they missed Messiah. And I'm going to say this one more time. The people that I've listed, I am not saying there is evil intent. I don't know them. I don't see their heart. But I am saying there is a day coming when that power will be held very exclusively. And we have to think outside of the box of religious and political presumption, or we could very likely be deceived. This has been Before It Was Headlines, It Was Prophecy. I'm Katie Elizabeth.